If you liked the video, feel free to subscribe. It would really help the channel, and we have battle reports, boarding actions, and list videos. Thanks for watching. Thanks for stopping by. This video is a deep dive on the infamous Adeptus Custodes Caladius Grav-tank. We will go through the datasheet and highlight the reason this tank is so good for the Custodes. It provides reliable long-range anti-tank, which the Custodes lack in almost every other unit we have access to. I will also go through each of the 5 Adeptus Custodes detachments, how each of these detachment rules and stratagems benefit the Caladius Grav-tank. The downside is that this is horribly expensive to buy. Let's take a look at the Caladius Grav-tank datasheet. It has a movement of 10, toughness 11, 2-up save with a 5-up invulnerable, 14 wounds, 6 leadership, and an OC of 4. And that toughness 11 can be a weak point when it's being hit by any of those strength 12 las cannons or anything like that. It will be wounding this on a 3+. Our ranged weapons, you can either take the Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon or the Accelerator Cannon. 99% of the time, you're taking this Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon. 48-inch range, 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 12, AP 3, damage D6 +2, and it is twin linked. The Accelerator Cannon, 48-inch range, 4 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 10, AP 1, damage 3. This does have twin linked and rapid fire 4, so if you are within 24 inches, you will have 8 shots with this gun instead. Still, the Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon beats it out just for reliability and total damage. And that AP 1 really hurts the Accelerator Cannon. And then it always has the twin Elastorm Bolt Cannon, 36-inch range, 3 attacks, hitting on 2s, strength 6, AP 1, damage 1, sustain hits 1, and like I said, 99% of the time, you're going to pick that Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon. The melee weapons, Armored Hull, nothing special, 4 attacks, hitting on 4s, strength 6, AP 0, damage 1. For the abilities, Deadly Demise D3, Martial Kata, yes, our tank knows karate, and Advanced Firepower. And that Advanced Firepower ability, each time a model makes an attack with its twin accelerator cannon that targets an enemy unit excluding monsters and vehicles, that attack has lethal hits ability. So if you're shooting infantry with the accelerator cannon, you're going to have lethal hits. The next part, each time this model makes an attack with its twin Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon that targets an enemy monster or vehicle unit, that attack has lethal hits ability. And this is why the twin Arachnus Blaze Cannon is so popular, because you have lethal hits into those tough monsters and vehicle units, and you just do more damage with more AP. It's more reliable as an anti-tank weapon. Next, we will take a look at the Caladius Grav-tank in the 5 different Adeptus Custodes detachments, how those detachment rules and stratagems benefit the Caladius Grav-tank. I will finish with a score out of 10 for each of these detachments for the Caladius Grav-tank. We will start with the Auric Champions. This is a quick and simple one. Nothing from the detachment works on the Caladius Grav-tank. The detachment rule and all of the stratagems need to be used on a character unit or a character model. The Caladius is not a character, nor can it join a character unit. We take this in Auric Champions for the datasheet alone to provide ranged anti-tank. I would still give this an 8 out of 10, even though it doesn't get any detachment support. It's still just a great unit and a great datasheet. Let's move on to the Shield Host detachment. The Shield Host detachment rule is Martial Mastery. If you have that Martial Kata ability, you could have crits on 5 or an extra AP 1 in melee. The Caladius Grav-tank does have the Martial Kata ability, meaning we could have that extra AP 1 or crits on 5 on our super dangerous karate tank. It's not something we're going to build around though. The Shield Host detachment does have 3 stratagems that do work on the Caladius Grav-tank. The first one is Arcane Genetic Alchemy. Any phase just after mortal wounds have been allocated, you can have a 4+ Feel No Pain to those mortal wounds. This is a fantastic way to mitigate one of the better ways to get wounds through on these tanks with mortal wounds. After the mortal wounds have been allocated, and any phase adds the spice to Arcane Genetic Alchemy. 1 CP to keep our Grav tanks on the table is well worth the price. Next up is Multi-Potentiality for 1 CP, and this is a fallback shoot and charge stratagem. This can help get us out of engagement with a melee unit that will kill the Caladius Grav-tank in its next activation. So maybe in the enemy turn, they charge you, we only have 3 wounds left, we can't take another melee phase. Use this stratagem to pull the tank back and still be able to shoot. If we don't have to worry about that enemy unit taking the tank out, maybe they only did 2 wounds, 3 wounds last round, there's not a lot of threat. We may want to keep the CP and shoot our way out, or shoot at another target with that -1 to hit. The tanks do hit on 2s, so we'll be hitting on 3s still. Sometimes it's better just to shoot your way out and hold on to that CP. And like the next stratagem, Archaeotech Munitions, this is a stratagem on the Caladius Grav-tank that is situational. The last stratagem for the Caladius Grav-tank in the Shield Host detachment is Archaeotech Munitions for 1 CP. In the shooting phase, you can select either lethal hits or sustain hits 1. I wanted to mention this stratagem since it does work on any Custodes unit. With 4 shots, the chances of getting sustain hits 1 are quite low. The tank already has lethal hits against those monsters and vehicles when you're using the Arachnus Heavy Blaze Cannon, so you would pick sustain hits on this. It's only 16% per shot. I'm not sure what combined that is, but that's quite low. If something really needs to die to win or turn the tide of the game, it is something we can use out of desperation, but for 1 CP, it's probably going to be wasted. You're not going to get many sustain hits with this. So with the detachment rule and these 3 stratagems, how do I score the Caladius Grav-tank in the Shield Host detachment? Even though there's not a lot of rule support for the Caladius Grav-tank from the Shield Host, 1 strong stratagem, 2 situational stratagems, and some better tank karate, I would give the Caladius Grav-tank an 8.5 out of 10, a great anti-tank unit in a Shield Host list. Next up is the Talons of the Emperor detachment. The detachment rule is Revered Companions. Psychona units from your army gain the Null Aegis ability, where if they are within 6 inches of another Adeptus Custodes unit, that unit gains a 5 of funeral pain to mortals and psychic attacks. All other Adeptus Custodes units from your army gain this ability, so our Caladius Grav-tank would have this ability, Deadly Unity. If our tank is within 6 inches of a Psychona unit, that Psychona unit will get a +1 to the hit roll. This is a nice little extra bonus if we can get the Caladius within 6 inches of a Psychona unit. It will also give us access to a 1 CP stratagem to upgrade that 5 up Feel No Pain to Mortals and Psychic to a 4 up Feel No Pain. Having a tank near some prosecutors holding our home objective is a good option. And that stratagem is Empiric Severance for 1 CP, or if you are within 6 inches of a Psychona unit, you could have a 4 up Feel No Pain to Mortals and Psychic attacks. A 4 up Feel No Pain against mortal wounds, you can't go wrong for 1 CP. Unlike Arcane Genetic Alchemy in the Shield Host detachment, we have to use this stratagem as the unit is targeted. So watch for the opponent trying to possibly bait this stratagem out of us, since it's not like Arcane Genetic Alchemy, where once the wounds have been allocated, you have to use it before they've been allocated. If we are within 6 inches to use this stratagem, that does mean we are within 6 inches to gain the 5 up Feel No Pain to Mortals anyways. Keep that in mind. If you're having a grenade thrown at you, maybe you want to hold on to the CP if you're at full wounds. If you're almost dead, you might want to use this stratagem. The next stratagem, Hunt is 1 for CP, is our Fallback Shoot and Charge. Fallback Shoot and Charge can be useful to get the Caladius tank out of dangerous melee combat, and just like the Shield Host, if the enemy unit in engagement does not pose that much threat, we just may want to save the CP and accept that -1 to the hit roll penalty. It could be used to steal back our home objective with the OC4 or some other sneaky plays too. This stratagem may not get used a lot, but it's a good one to have in the toolbox. The last stratagem I want to talk about for the Talons of the Emperor in the Caladius Grav-tank is Taloned Pincer. In your opponent's movement phase, if they end a normal, advance, or fall back within 9 inches of this Caladius Grav-tank, we could do a normal 6-inch move. This can be a great stratagem to get the Caladius Grav-tank out of line of sight. It is even better for extending enemy charges. It can even be used to help keep a higher OC on the home objective. Maybe something has moved close to the prosecutors on your home objective, but they are now 9 inches within this Caladius Grav-tank. Maybe move this tank onto our home objective just to make it a lot harder to take. Even move this tank to charge block that unit that might be charging our prosecutors is an even stronger play as long as they don't tear through your tank. I have used this both ways to keep the home objective safe, by moving my units off the home objective away from a scary charge threat and then blow that threat away the next turn and take the home objective back, or just to move more units onto the home objective to make it a lot harder to take. Now, what do I score the Caladius Grav-tank for the Talons of the Emperor? Like most detachments so far, having a Caladius Grav-tank in the list adds some long-range anti-tank threat. The Caladius does have some decent support in this detachment, with the 5 of Funeral Pain to Mortals and Psychic Detachment rule, 1 fantastic stratagem, and 2 decent stratagems. I give the Caladius Grav-tank a 9 out of 10 for the Talons of the Emperor. There is a Stratagem Talons interlock that adds some strength and AP to weapons, but it only works on infantry. If that Talons interlock had worked on the Caladius Grav-tank, I'd give this a 9.5. But as of now, it only works on infantry, so I give this a 9 out of 10. The next detachment, and in my opinion, the best detachment for a Caladius Grav-tank, the Solar Spearhead. The Solar Spearhead detachment rule is Auric armor. While the Caladius Grav-tank is at full strength, we'll add 2 to the OC. While it's below starting strength, you reroll hits of 1. Below half strength, reroll hits of 1 and wounds of 1. The other part of the detachment rule, Moritoi Ancients, only works on Adeptus Custodes walker units. This is a great detachment rule for the Caladius Grav-tank. OC6 at full strength makes it much harder to take our home objective with a few of these Grav-tanks lurking around our back lines. Below starting strength, reroll hits of 1 is exactly what these tanks needed to make them even more reliable. Reroll wounds of 1 will not matter much on those twin-linked Arachnus heavy blaze cannons. The little pew-pews on the bottom will get those rerolls of 1, so that could help taking out some light infantry units. The Caladius Grav-tank has the most stratagem support in this detachment. The first one, flawless construction. In the enemy's shooting phase, if the incoming attack has a higher strength than our toughness, -1 to the wound roll. The toughness 11 of the Caladius has always been one of the few weaknesses of the Grav-tank. For 1 CP, we can give this unit a lot more survivability against those strength 12 or higher weapons. It allows us to be more aggressive with the Grav-tank. Even if it does get shot, if it loses some wounds, it will only shoot back even harder with reroll hits of 1. And reroll hits of 1 really makes this tank reliable. So now you're rerolling any of your misses since you're hitting on 2s, and then it's twin length, so you're rerolling any of your wounds. Next up is Relentless Persecution for 1 CP, and all these stratagems are 1 CP, which makes this detachment even better for the Caladius. And this is our advance and shoot stratagem. Another great stratagem for the Caladius Grav-tank, even though it is not a stratagem we will use much during a game, it is the threat that these tanks can advance and shoot we want. These tanks hit hard enough, the opponent will have to keep in mind the fact that we can add a potential 6 inches to the Caladius' movement to get into some other shot lines. Next up is Unstoppable for 1 CP. This will allow us to move our Caladius Grav-tank through terrain features. This stratagem is like Relentless Persecution. It is the threat that we could drive one of our tanks through a wall to get some line of sight on a target, combine it with Relentless Persecution to advance through a wall and still shoot. This detachment adds a lot of potential to these Grav-tanks. And that seems to be the name of the game for the Solar Spearhead, is just potential threat. We could do this, we could do that. The last stratagem in the Solar Spearhead detachment I want to talk about is Punishment Inescapable. For 1 CP in the shooting phase, it allows our tank to ignore cover and any modifiers to the ballistic or hit roll. This is another good stratagem in this detachment that helps fix the few weaknesses of the Caladius. AP3 is good, but against those 2+ saves and cover, it can be a bit swingy. Now we can make sure we get that full AP3 on the 4 Arachnus heavy blaze cannon shots. It also will ignore smoke or any other ballistic skill or hit modifier, including if the tank is in engagement range or below 5 wounds. So if it's bracketed, -1 to hit, you can use this stratagem to ignore that. You can use this stratagem to make sure it's still hitting on 2s. You will be rerolling your 1s since you are below starting strength. So this stratagem is a way to help keep these tanks hitting at full power no matter where they are on the table. Now let's look at the score for the Solar Spearhead. This is easily the best detachment for the Caladius Grav-tank, with many different ways to either buff the damage or the survivability of the Caladius Grav-tank. Plus, it shores up the few weaknesses while making them even more reliable to get successful hits. It's no real surprise here, the Caladius Grav-tank gets a perfect score of 10 out of 10 in the Solar Spearhead detachment. I've been practicing and playing games with these Caladius Grav-tanks in this detachment, and this detachment makes these things so reliable and so dangerous. It makes the enemy think, do I want to shoot this tank? If I can't one-shot it, it's only going to shoot back at me stronger. Flawless construction for -1 to wound really helps keep these things on the table. It's a really great detachment for these tanks, and I can see it being really good for a Land Raider as well. Let's quickly touch on the Null Maiden Vigil. It's going to be another quick one like the Auric Champions. The Caladius Grav-tank gets no benefits from the detachment rule or the stratagems from the Null Maiden Vigil. It still provides fantastic range support to a Null Maiden Vigil list though. I score this an 8 out of 10 for the datasheet alone, because even though we don't get any rule support from this detachment, the datasheet is so good and there's only so many units we have access to that give us some long-range anti-tank support. We could take a Land Raider, we could take a Knight, or we just take this tank in a Null, Maiden, Vigil list. Now let's go over a general game plan for these Caladius Grav-tanks. There are a few different ways to play these Grav-tanks during a game. The first one, they can come out turn 1 to get some shots onto some important enemy targets while screening our backlines. Another way to play them is to keep them hidden for the first few turns, let the enemy bring their army out some onto the board, screen our backline, and shoot down any enemy units who do make it into our deployment zone. Then in the later turns, we start pushing these tanks out. The last way to play them, and of course there's some other ways to play these, is to play them aggressive. Push them onto objectives, push them into the midboard, use them as move and charge block units. Playing them this way, they are in a lot more danger though, so I wouldn't recommend doing this unless you want to play a really aggressive game. Once again, we see why this is the best ranged anti-tank unit we have access to. The Solar Spearhead makes this even more reliable and harder to kill with 1 CP. The other detachments do not have as much support for the Caladius Grav-tank. Luckily, they do not need a lot of support. I hope we do eventually get a plastic tank to help some codex balance and the wallets of my fellow Custodes players. And like always, if you have any questions or I've missed something, throw it down in the comments. Subscribe for weekly battle reports, list videos, boarding actions, and other Warhammer 40K content. And like I always say, thanks for watching, thanks for stopping by.